stuff to do. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for making it to the Santa Barbara User Experience event. My name is JJ. You read the description. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, really about how we've kind of incorporated UX into AppFolio, which is a real Agile environment. I'm going to give you a lot of fun details there. But first, a little bit about me. So I actually went to school. I'm formally trained in photography. And then a whole bunch of stuff happened, and now I'm in UX. I am now the Director of UX at AppFolio. It's actually a really kind of cool dots you can connect. I can tell you the larger story later if you're interested. But really what I kind of did in the middle of that was graphic design, and then ended up in digital design, kind of landed in it. And my experience with digital design is really interesting. I've now worked at a few different companies, primarily in a waterfall environment. I want to tell you a little story. Anybody here ever read Hyperbole and a Half? Cool. I'm totally going to rip her off. And I've read her blog. She said it's cool that I can use her images, but they best portray kind of how I was feeling. So this is a typical dialogue between myself and an engineer, kind of pre-AppFolio days. All right, so I have been given the task of writing a UX spec. And I'm like, okay, cool, there's going to be this cool product, this cool interaction. And I'm like, I have no idea what is going on with the technology of this. And I'd call my engineer and I'd say, hey, I need your help with this. Can I run some ideas by you? Or this requires the use of some technology that I don't understand. Can I talk to you about it? And basically the answer I would get is like, I'm so busy right now, I'd love to help you, but like I'm working on this other stuff and I'm told this is what I have to work on. More commonly it was, I'm remote or overseas, so our schedules won't ever align. Less frequently, but definitely something that happens. Why do you need to know about that technology? You just worry your pretty little head about what it looks like, and you tell me what to build, right? So basically what you're saying is, no. Okay, so I'm going to go spend all night sometimes, and this really happened, just going to town on this UX spec, and I got this design spec ready to go, and I'm like, yes, this product is going to be awesome, right? Deliver it to the engineer 3 months later. It totally doesn't work. Oh my gosh, this whole interaction that I spec'd out is broken. It doesn't work. Engineer, did you notice this doesn't work? Well, what I'd like you to do, JJ, is refer to page 63, annotation 4.1 in your spec document. I actually developed it exactly how you wanted me to. Anyway, I just like that. But that is how it felt, right? And honestly, that's my dialogue with engineers, and now that I have a really friendly relationship with engineers, you can imagine there's frustration on their end as well. The designer gave me this spec document, and it didn't work, and I tried my best to do it the way they wanted to, and then they blamed me when it wasn't right, right? You can kind of see both sides of the story. But in any case, I walked away from those previous experiences where I was writing doing detailed mock-ups with detailed specifications and design docs, and I decided, whatever I do, I'm never, ever doing this again. I don't want to do this. I want to work with smart people. Up comes AppFolio. I actually had no intention of working at AppFolio. It wasn't after talking to Jason Randall, my now boss, that he really convinced me this is going to give me that environment that I'm looking for. So for those of you who don't know AppFolio, we are a portfolio of SaaS applications, and we serve the small to medium verticals. Our flagship product was AppFolio Property Manager, serving obviously the property management industry. About a year and a half ago, we acquired a company called MyCase, and they serve the legal practice management industry. So when I joined AppFolio nearly 4 years ago, the first step was just to understand what the culture looked like, and this is what it was. The company is founded by technology leaders. Klaus Schauser is the thought leader behind GoToMeeting, GoToMyPC. It was Expert City, acquired by Citrix. You had John Walker, who was CTO of various technology companies. The whole company was founded on what cool technologies can we build, right? Which means it's an engineering-centric culture. Even today, we've grown. I was hired 75. We've got almost 300 employees right now. It's a very engineering-centric culture, which gives us a competitive advantage. Because of that, it also means that we're an Agile shop since the beginning, and I'm going to go in a little bit of detail of what all this means. And not only that, but when I first started, one of the books they gave me was 4 Steps to the Epiphany by Stephen Blank, which I'll also talk a little about. But basically, they're adopters of the lean startup ideology. And this was the kicker for me. Go. Ease of use was already their #1 core competitive advantage, but they hired me. Like, why? Like, you guys already did this without a UX person. It was their #1 value, ease of use. That's how we're going to disrupt these markets, right? So, who here has not heard of the lean startup? That's what I figured. Who here has heard of 4 Steps to the Epiphany? Okay. So basically, the 4 Steps to the Epiphany was written by Stephen Blank. It's self-proclaimed as the book that really launched the lean startup movement. And essentially, really, at the core of these books is finding the right idea through customer validation, if I can sum it up into one word, right? It's build the smallest thing you possibly can and validate it with customers. And we've done all our market validation, all our customer validation, following this model with really the smallest thing, and the key word is MVP, right? Start with something really small, listen to customers, and then iterate up to where you want to go based on customer feedback. You let customer feedback kind of drive your roadmap. So for anybody, just quickly, so what do I need to know about Agile as a UX person coming in here? This is the Agile Manifesto. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. But the reality is, as a UX practitioner, I've paid attention to one thing, and that is that the Agile Manifesto actually leaves design, traditional UX design, out of the picture. That's what I did, this documentation. But the truth is, I saw this, remember my story, and I said, awesome. Now I don't have to produce those documents. But I also said, how the hell am I going to do this? Right? What is it that I'm going to do? So I did a lot of learning. There's actually a ton of resources. This was hired in 2010, I guess, and this article was the first place I started. It's written by Jeff Patton, and it was actually written in 2008. So this stuff, and a lot of this stuff still stands, right? This is one example of a starting point. These are these 12 emerging best practices for UX in Agile. I bolded some of the ones that I focused on at the beginning, but it's just one resource, right? But there's a ton out there. The other thing I did is I went out and talked to people. What are all other Agile UX people doing? I'm talking to other companies and other organizations. But the problem that I met with that is that this is what I heard over and over. Our UX team works on what we call sprint 0. So the UX team is doing all their designing and validating a sprint ahead of the engineers. So by the time the engineers, it's come time for them to work on it, it's ready to go. What's wrong with that picture? The UX team this is very waterfall. Those UX teams they're still doing their own thing, and maybe what they're handing over is a user story. But there's when you pull in developers in here, I'm sure there's a little bit more collaboration, but really the ownership is on the UX team. And that's kind of where I decided that we were going to make a difference. And the difference was the ownership is not going to be on the UX team. So, what I started with, the first thing that I realized that could make the biggest impact in this company that they weren't doing before was introducing UX research. Okay? So we have market validation we're already doing, listening to customers is in our DNA, we're already doing all the right stuff for like our product, but what are the engineers not getting? And it's this. So for my first project that I worked on AppFolio, I kept my design super, super minimum. I did a rough sketch wireframe, and then I called the engineer who was also actually remote at the time, come to think of it, and said, hey, I'd like you to be on this call that I scheduled with the customer that's going to give me feedback on this. He joins the call or go-to meeting. Customer can't really figure out, there's expanding and collapsing things, and they don't really get it. And so I showed it to a few other people, and he was on every call. And then one day, I came into work, and he's like, JJ, I got so sick of them not being able to click around that I just built it, right? I just built a prototype. I'm like, cool, all right, cool. So now that it's functional prototype, right? And we show it to a few more people, and what we're learning along the way is what's working and what isn't for them. This is prototype, right? And myself and there was a couple engineers involved in this progress. We're all on the phone with the customers together. And so what I'm not doing here is going out and prototyping and coming back and being like, we need to make all these changes. They're just changing them. So this is called RITE method. This is prototype, which eventually turns into usability testing. But RITE stands for rapid iterative testing evaluation. And basically what that means is in traditional usability testing, you would test like 5 to 7 users and then go back and report your findings of what the usability study is. When we do usability testing, all the engineers are there, and if user number 1 has an obvious problem, we're not going to watch users 2 through 7 have that problem. We're going to fix it before they see it and catch them along the way. The other thing that we did is just start inviting engineers to the conversation, right? We're just going to call a customer. We're not even going to show them anything. We're just going to have a conversation with them. Will you come be in this meeting with us and talk to customers? And one of the things we also do as a UX team is a contextual inquiry. So this is when you actually are going out into the field and you're watching users in their natural habitat, customers, people in their natural habitat. And we bring engineers with us. Like if I'm just there as a researcher, it does me no good because I'm not the one building the software, right? And so research is going really well, and engineers are like, I want more. So this was about a year in, we introduced this idea of User Research Friday, and this is a monthly ritual that we do once a month. We order in food, and usually the day before we decide what we're going to talk about, we get all the engineers that are outside of their roadmap and their little teams, and we share peripheral insights. You know, hey, this is what we learned from Google Analytics. One of our popular ones that we do is we do a live customer panel. We say, today we're going to talk about, for our property managers, what it's like dealing with tenants. We're going to get 3 property managers on the phone and HD faces, and we're going to put them in a room with a camera on all the engineers, and we're just going to have a conversation and a dialogue. It's pretty awesome. So, research is going well. Now, how do we raise the bar on design? What is that going to take in this environment? And the answer for us was collaboration, that was key. So a couple examples of what we do there. Our biggest tool, the first thing we tried and remains the #1 rated things about our engineers are design studios. So this is how, when we kick off particularly bigger projects, we get everybody's ideas on one place, and this really informs the whole team, not just the designer, what we're going to prototype. And then when we validate the prototype, just like my previous story, the engineers are all there. We're not going to schedule a validation call that the team can't come to, because we're completely missing the point. We're actually at the point now in our sprint backlog that the story for the sprint commitment is, as a team, we've validated this prototype, right? So that we're working on it together. This is our small little usability lab that we're expanding here. And then design pairing. So even still, through all this, every once in a while I'll get an engineer that have a story and they go, JJ, what should it look like? And I'm like, well, why don't we sit down and figure it out? And sometimes we're design pairing in Photoshop with the engineer sitting next to the designer. More often than not, engineers in the code, ready to build, got the UI up, and the designers sit next to them and they're tweaking things just to kind of do it in place. So we're trying to do just enough design just up front and make this whole process emergent. So the reality is we've got all these tools that we use that facilitate this research and collaboration, and facilitate is the key word. What UX becomes in this environment is a facilitator of these things. These are all tools and techniques and things that we've tried, that we do today in order to get this information onto the teams. And another thing to mention is that we try new tools all the time. We fail at tools all the time, and that's okay. The point is that we keep trying, we keep adding, because our process will continue to evolve. The company will continue to grow, and the more tools we have in our toolbox to pick out for the right project at the right time, the more it's going to help teams come up with solutions collaboratively. This book, there's lots of books I could recommend. This one, especially if you're in this environment trying to figure out how to involve your team a little bit more in the UX process, highly recommend this book. This book was great for us. We were doing a lot of this stuff and then read it, and if you read the Digital Designer's Guide to Agile, Lean, and Continuous, that like sums up our engineering team and our culture at AppFolio and one sentence, so it really, really is a great fit for us. But it gives you all those tools, design studios in there, plus more to consider. And in that book, they actually do a sort of UX, Agile UX manifesto, which we completely just ripped off because it's so true for us. And these are the values that we share with new hires at AppFolio, with new engineering hires, new UX hires, that we are inclusive, that collaborative is our key word, that our designs are emergent with direction, and that we're considerate of all of the balance. You know, on any given team, and I'll go into a little bit more what our teams look like in a second, but on any given team, you've got a product owner, you've got a UX designer, and you've got an engineer, and they all kind of have their particular areas of expertise, right? Product owner can really focus on the business, which frees up UX to really focus on customer needs and usability, and then the tech has, like, you know, we want to make sure the code is clean, and maybe that thing you want to do with UX doesn't make sense to us because of the architecture, and we all, the point is that we all are considerate of those needs so that we find reasonable compromises between those two. So, quick break. I want everybody to stand up, and I want you to find a partner. I'm going to make you move around, put your beer down. Well, you don't have to put your beer down.
I don't have to beer. That's just a lot of beer. I thought anybody would have beer. You know, John.
Alright, does everybody have their partner? Jan, you have a partner? Okay. Anybody not have a partner? Okay. Lizzie, can I borrow you for a second? I'm going to demonstrate what we're going to do. We're going to do a little exercise with each other, okay? We're going to do this things. By the way, I just stole this from somebody who did this for me last week, and I thought it was really fun. Okay, so I'm going to say 1. You're going to say 2. I'm going to say 3, and then you're going to go back to 1, and we're going to exchange that. You want to try it? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? So I want you to turn to your partner, and I want you to practice doing that. Okay. How'd that go? Did everybody do okay? Or anybody screw up on that one? Make it hard? Pretty easy? Alright. Okay, we'll switch it up. We'll come back up. Okay. So, I'm going to say 1, and you're going to go, and then I'm going to say 3. Okay? 1, 3. 1, 3. 1, 3. 1. There you go. Okay? Have at it.
It sounded simple.
Okay, I'm going to say 1. You're going to, and I'm going to. Okay? 1. 1. 1. 1. Go for it.
One clap.
Anybody not screw up the whole time?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Winners! Sorry, I don't have any. So that's just a little bit of icebreaker exercise. We do a lot of facilitation at AppFolio, and a lot of times you start off with something like that. We have one facilitator who does things like this with groups. You can imagine how confusing that gets with groups. But it kind of shows, part of what that shows is how important it is to be in smaller groups rather than larger groups. So, okay, so that was just a quick break. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to give you a little bit of a design challenge. Who here is familiar with Garmin Connect? Runner.
I used to work there.
Did you?
Intern.
How funny.
Yeah, I use it.
Okay, so I was racking my brain for an easy design challenge, and hopefully this will kind of work out. And we're going to spend all of like a few minutes on this, okay? So Garmin Connect, what this is, I'm going to play this little video. This video should play. There we go. So this is when you're running using your GPS device. You see a list of all that you're running, or trail running or hiking, all these various activities that use your GPS device. And this is the dashboard where you can go in and you can actually click on your event. And you can kind of see all kinds of cool data about it. So I see there's a map of my run and my pace time, and all any data that I want to capture on my Garmin GPS device. So this is a free site that you get to go to. I think you can go there anyway, but it obviously very easily connects with your Garmin devices. Okay. And so the design challenge. Let me make sure I get this right. So, this is should go back to the dashboard. Okay, so this is the dashboard where it's kind of boring. There's not a lot of stuff you can do with it, right? So here's what I want, and I want you to, no talk. Just want you to silently think about this for a second. The design challenge is this. Redesign the Garmin Connect activity dashboard to make it more appealing and engaging. Okay, so that's rule one. Make it more appealing and more engaging. Users should quickly be able to view activity highlights by location, by similar distances, and by activity type. So those of you, there's note cards on some of these, and I have some to hand out if you want to take notes. But what I want you to do right now, and I'll reread this in a second, but what I want you to do is just think silently to yourself. Any ideas, you can sketch them, you can write them, any ideas that come to mind of like what could improve this page. You don't have to write them if you don't want to. Let me know if you need note cards. So, the design challenge again is redesign the Garmin Connect activity dashboard to make it more appealing and engaging. Users should quickly be able to view activity highlights by location, by similar distances, and by activity type, like running, biking, and hiking. Chew on that for a minute. I'll leave you with your thoughts. Give me another 30 seconds or so to think this through. Okay, wrap up whatever thought you have, and now what I want you to do is pair back up with your partner, and find yourself another person and their partner. Now, I'm going to break you up into groups of 4, and I would like you to share your ideas with each other. And the way that I recommend you do this. So I want this to be more of a conversation, right? So I want you to spend time in groups of 4 just share ideas. And what I recommend you do is figure out what's similar. So if you're in a group and somebody starts, I think we should have a block of content here, and you have something similar to that, say, oh yeah, I had something like that too, and kind of try to have the conversation that way. And if somebody says something that nobody has, just go again, have somebody else go, okay? So spend a couple minutes in pairs of 4. Pairs? Groups of 4 to talk through your ideas. Okay. Okay, so debrief. How many groups ended up coming up with more ideas collectively that fed off of each other?
Yeah, if we refined our ideas.
Did anybody not come up with more ideas collectively? How many of you individually would design the page exactly the way that you had originally thought you would before talking to somebody else?
Nice.
Yay, collaboration! Good job, you guys! Prove my point. I was really hoping nobody was going to raise their hand. Okay, cool. So, little break, a little nice little, get moving. So now I'm going to go shift in a little bit about what this looks like today. So give you a little bit of history, a little bit of kind of the foundation. I want to give you an actual case study. So AppFolio property management software. How many of you have rented an apartment or a house before?
Everybody.
Right? Yeah. How many of you are familiar with the inspection form, like when you move in, property managers say, you check all your walls and ceilings and all the annoying things they ask you to check. Well, property managers actually do that themselves when you move out. And they do it on paper, surprisingly. And so we were tasked at the beginning of the year to build a mobile-friendly inspection feature within our application. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we approached that and the steps we took. With a big white blank page. Oh, yes. So, the first thing I need to do is explain to you how our teams are structured, because it's going to give you a lot more information about how we work together, okay? So, we are separated in Agile. We are separated into separate Scrum teams. Every Scrum team has about 3 to 4 engineers and a QA engineer. And then between 2 Scrum teams are shared people, and that includes an Agile coach, a product manager, and a UX designer, okay? Not only that, but we actually have these clusters of Scrum teams that actually separate themselves out and become what we're calling an engineering college. And every college has shared people, including a director and a UX facilitator. There's not a good title for what this person does, right? But it's someone, which I'll get into a little bit more. And the truth is, even within this college, there's also an engineering lead. But we're kind of growing this out. This is a fairly new concept for us. But it gives you an idea of, when I say team, I'm usually talking about the small teams, okay? That's the same slide. Backwards. Nice animations. Okay, so I spent a lot of time on. Do you like that? No. So the UX roles, since we're here to talk about UX, a little bit about that, the difference between these roles. The UX designer is a dedicated design person on the team. The facilitator is the one that's kind of supporting the team through all these activities that I kind of shared a little bit earlier. All right. We discovered on ThoughtBot this article that we pretty much just followed, and now this is what we do. We find something cool, and then we adapt it. That works for us. But this is called the Product Design Sprint. This image was actually ripped right off their website. And it's basically splitting up your big feature discovery and solution into 5 phases. The key to this is that it's the Product Design Sprint. So remember back when I told you that other Agile UX people were working in Sprint 0 so that they'd have everything ready when the engineers started? Guys, this is Sprint 0, but engineers are involved. This means that the entire first sprint of something big, like, hey, go launch this big new feature, the only deliverables that the engineers have is to understand and to figure out how they're going to solve the problem. Not writing code, they're just understanding. And I'm going to walk you through this project, particularly what happens at each phase. So So the understand phase, this is understanding the problem. This is building empathy of the customer. This is understanding their pains, their desires. It's also understanding the business purpose. There's business reasons why this is the right strategic move for us to do at this point. And all we're doing is feeding information. We're looking at how competitors are handled the situation. We're going on these contextual inquiries. We're scheduling customer interviews, tons of interviews in this sprint. We're just giving engineers raw data, like, hey, this is all the feedback. These are actual feedback requests that I just pulled by searching mobile inspections. Hundreds of customers that have asked for this over the years. And a lot of times there's little gems in like how they'd expect it, reading through that data. We figure out who our personas are. This is all about understanding the problem and getting a really good sense and building that empathy so that someone's calling me. So that we're on a better platform for solving the problem. Which then we move into phase 2. This is the diverge phase. So we're going to go off individually, kind of like what we just did. And we're going to do our own research. We're going to look at other competitors. We're going to talk more to maybe go to a service representative, one of our customer support people, and talk to them about it. We're going to do our own little kind of investigation and discovery, right? And as part of this, it's not required, but you might want to do some sketches of how you think you would solve this if it were left up to you. The truth is, given that the sprint is dedicated to that, most of the engineers want to sketch and want to actually provide this information. Then we move into the converge stage, which is the design studio is the biggest piece of that. So everybody takes all their ideas and all their pre-sketches and they come to this design studio meeting. And this is where they have the opportunity to share ideas. We do a couple of exercises to get ideas out on the table, and then they give a presentation of the pre-sketches and basically defend, like, this is how I think we should do it. But the same thing that you guys just experienced, in this activity, we do a refinement exercise where they actually, in that meeting, they have 10 minutes to think about what they would change and steal people's ideas. We do dot voting on a bunch of this stuff, so like you get 4 dots and you kind of pick your best ideas. And what this does, it helps us understand where we all align, and it helps us bubble up the things that really we think we're going to do, and kind of set aside the stuff that maybe is pie in the sky, and we encourage pie in the sky, but this is probably, we don't need to do this, right? If you go back to MVP, minimum viable product, well now it's kind of minimum viable prototype, right? What's the smallest thing that we could have our UX designer build so that we can start to validate some of these ideas? And so that moves us into this prototype stage. And so we have this activity where we actually take all the themes that came out of the design studio and we group them. And we say, look, the easy ones, or these are the givens, these are the things we absolutely know the prototype is going to include. And then these are all the stuff we're so not even close to worrying about right now. We're going to, yes and no are the easy ones. And then there's kind of fuzzy ones. Here's the really cool stuff we know we probably have to build, but we don't. This is outside of the scope of what we're validating right now. We just want to validate the concept, not an additional feature within it, right? So this is stuff we're going to listen for when it bubbles up to see how we prioritize these things. And then there's these kind of like, I call it prototype variations, we used to call them deal breakers, but this is kind of where we are aligning. What are the disagreements? And what this does is inform how many prototypes we're going to build. And the truth is on this project, and so far every time we've done this, the team is aligned so well that we really have only focused on one prototype, right? Because the idea is to keep it really lean. And then as a team, we sketch out what's going to happen, what are we going to build, and then by that point, the role of the UX designer is just to actually make it happen. Not to concept it, not to solutionize, but take the team's vision and build out that prototype. And then we move directly into the final stage, which is test and learn. Follows kind of the same process that I shared with you before. We have a UX prototype, show it to a bunch of people, and then we iterate on it. And then somewhere in here, you end up going from UX prototype to, okay, we're actually going to start building this. We've validated enough of the concept that we feel comfortable writing the code behind this. Maybe it's not all functional, we'll still call it a prototype because it's not tied to the back end or whatever, but we're actually going to start building it and iterating it and keep talking. And it's a constant conversation with customers. And with this feature, we've actually, you show it to enough people until you're actually ready. You're like, okay, we've already released this to alpha. So much stuff. That whole like listen for thing that we know we need to do. There's a lot of that we haven't done, but we feel so comfortable with this that like we're ready to kind of put this out in the wild. We're about to put it into beta. And the truth is, what we learned is that we could probably totally release it to customers while we're still working on it, which is ideal because we'll get all that feedback without yet all the stuff that we thought for sure we needed to have in our MVP, right? It's pretty cool. So this is kind of it broken down again into a process and some of the activities we do under each phase. We're always talking to customers, so no matter what, it's all about that conversation. Anybody have any questions about? Yes?
I'm sure this question kind of depends on the scope of the project, but kind of how much time do you picture associated with each phase?
Yeah. So that is something we're still working out. The reality is the product design sprint has bled into more than one sprint because we're still sort of figuring it out. Mm-hmm. I think ideally it doesn't take as much time as it's been taking us, but we also have a really good culture where we're allowed to kind of try things out. I think ideally, and the understand I think is the biggest one. I think we went into this, someone thought that, oh, by the end of the first week we should be able to do a design studio. I'm like, you can't schedule enough customer interviews within the first week to really get the good gist of it. So our sprints are 2-week periods. I think it's possible to get at least a sketch prototype of what you want to do by the end of the sprint. But
how much time is spent for the engineers, like doing the UX stuff, like the traditional stuff where you're playing with, like, you know, sketching out prototypes and understanding like the user's needs versus like the actual like building, or is it done at the same time, or what? How much time do they? Like, how does the engineers' work day break up or work week?
Well, this whole sprint, it's only that.
Oh,
They're not coding.
Oh, really?
The whole first sprint is dedicated. We keep them focused by your sprint commitment is just to understand the stuff.
Sweet.
And to work to figure out how you're going to build it. After that, you're doing like prototype validations or usability testing, and all that is built into their sprint. So they're probably, there's a story of like, you know, as a user, I can add my unit onto my inspection, but there's also like, as a team, we've validated, you know, we've done usability testing on this or whatever, like we're fitting that into our sprint commitment.
Is everybody in the same location?
Yes.
Same space?
Mostly. So that's a really good point. I have done this remotely. It's doable. From a facilitation perspective, it's a lot of work. The very first time I did a design studio, my key engineer was remote. So the very first time I did a design studio, I did it remotely, but it was totally successful. It just required a lot of, I made everybody come in with their computers because I needed to use like Google, like some collaborative software for us to look at things, because there's a like sticky note component to this. And so that was a little bit of a logistical thing, but you can make it happen. Time zones would be an issue. Like overseas, I think, forget it. That would be hard. And I guess that's the point. That's a really good point. Like back to our team structure, co-location is really key. You know, within each of those teams, those shared people, like my UX designer that sits between these teams literally sits between those teams so that, you know, she's part of those conversations. Anybody else have any questions? Cool. So, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, what was the process that led to building this structure? Like, was there phases in between where you started, you know, with another system and
Yes.
kind of progressed along?
Yes. So, design studios we've been doing for a couple of years now, and this product design sprint was just this year that we started it. It's awesome for us. And what we would do, everybody loved the design studio, so they'd make time for it, but we were working ahead of the sprint. We were just requiring engineers time and taking their focus. So that was at a time where it wasn't part of their backlog to actually work on this, but they wanted to be a part of it, and so they would take out of their time out of their busy sprint to come to design studios, about an hour-and-a-half meeting to come to that. But what they didn't have the time to do was like the forethought. This diverge thing that wasn't happening as much prior to that. And it's key. It's the one thing that is just that I've seen the teams that have experienced this process just totally flourish in terms of innovation because they fully understand the problem and they've had the time to think about it. So just to wrap up, again, so I'm here to talk about, autonomous, self-organized UX and what that looks like. So what does the UX team look like when you're not actually doing the UX, right? And it's this: we value over everything user empathy. If there's one thing that we're doing, if we're doing it right, it's establishing empathy among the engineers and among the organization. Collaborating on solutions. And then the big key is that we're just facilitators. We're just facilitators to get this stuff in front of the people that are actually going to make the really smart decisions around how to solve things. And then we empower the team and educate. So we're there, and we're always saying it, we don't own usability, you do. Right? The teams do. I don't own usability, I'm not on a team. I definitely don't own usability, right? And then education, so books we read or articles we read, or oftentimes I'll have like a webinar, and I'll invite the entire dev team into the conference room. Like, I'm going to watch this thing, and I'm surprised that people, they show up because they're interested in this stuff. This is actually a slide that I share with new hires, by the way, just to make sure they know that we're on the product team, but we're not product owners, and that gives us an interesting advantage in that we tend to sort of align more on the engineering side of stuff because we're on the solution stuff, while product focuses mostly, although product's involved in all of this, but they have a lot of problem facing perspectives. We're definitely not the deliverers of polished design. So I've told you before, when somebody asks me for a mock-up, I always ask them, well, what do you think? I've actually done totally unnecessary design studios just to get people that keep asking for mock-ups in the exercise of actually empowerment. You actually have really good ideas, and I want to hear them, and this is the best way to get it out. And that we're not the sole owners of product usability. That's basically it. UX team has jobs. We also have some front-end engineering jobs. I know that we have some of you here, and not to steal Procore's thunder. Do you have another question?
Yeah, just kind of a general question. You showed your image of how many engineers per QA and per UX and product manager and whatnot. How many teams are there in general? How many Scrum teams do you guys have?
Currently, we are just about to spin up our sixth or fifth product-facing Scrum team. No, sixth. Sorry. We're growing.
5 or 6.
Is it 6?
I think so.
The new team
Wow.
is a 6 team.
Ops teams that are separate.
Yeah, and so then I guess on top of that, what we also have is 2 engineering backlog teams. So we have teams that are solely focused on our infrastructure projects. And so UX, every once in a while, like if they're ripping out components, like UI components, we'll get involved, but for the most part, we don't get involved with those teams.
Gotcha. And I guess of those 6 teams, how many are focused on big features in the process that you just showed? And how many are kind of smaller day-to-day things or whatever it may be?
We're doing a lot of big stuff right now.
Okay.
I think part of our strategy is kind of trying to find a balance of that. But there's, the one thing is, a year ago we had 3 teams. So all of a sudden when you have a bunch of teams, you're like, do all the things, and so that's kind of where we're at right now. I think that'll probably level up. It's definitely, from this facilitation UX point of view and hiring point of view, it's tricky to keep up with. But
There's
it's
one
exciting.
team that's always doing day-to-day.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we definitely have teams that are doing this stuff, other stuff. Yes.
Was it a challenge to get buy-in for this product design sprint thing? Like having people not freak out that, engineers aren't coding.
I know, I guess, and I should I definitely have the benefit of a culture that promotes this kind of stuff. Product design sprint was 100% backed by the VP of engineering. Go. And I recognize that as a key component. One day I'd love to give a talk about how you kind of sell this to people who don't like the idea of developers for not writing code for 2 sprints. But I'm hoping that the experiences we have we can share that, because the truth is, if we didn't do that for a sprint, there's no way we'd be in alpha right now. I believe that. It was totally worthwhile to get, because you just move so much faster. If the engineer has all the information in their head and they're not relying on somebody to tell them what to do or figure it out for them and come back and tell them, and then you just save a lot of overhead that way. Great. Thank you guys.